Now, this is a story all about how
our bills get flipped into a lot.
I'd like to take a minute and just sit right there.
I'll tell you how a bill becomes on this or chain back.
I promised myself that we would do a lovely little episode about Yakuza today, or Yakuza, I don't know, I say Yakuza throughout the whole thing, but I promised myself early last week today would be positive, uplifting, talk about game design, not talk about the usual industry bullshit.
In a legislator's mind, an idea is raised.
In the law book is where they spend most of their day.
Drafting out, maxing out, hardly relaxing, all cool.
Do you know how much self-discipline it took to not dedicate today's episodes to the ESRB and their pathetic non-response to the so-called loot box controversy by slapping in-game purchases as a label on anything with in-game purchases, which is practically everything? But I didn't do an episode on that today. I did a nice positive one because people are always, Jim, you should do more positive episodes. And I'm like, yeah, I probably should. I would like to, but the industry keeps getting in the way. So come hell or high water, today will be all about why I think Yakuza's map design is the best map design because of the stuff what's in it. And that's what we're going to talk about. None of the other stuff. Plus, if a lot of people watch it, that's good for me, and if not a lot of people watch it, I can say, well, you tell me to make nice and happy episodes, but none of you fuckers watch it, which for me is win-win. So, yeah, I think I'm good either way. I would prefer it if you all watched it. You don't have to, but be my guest.
Life's good when you're
all introducing bills inside of House Chambers.
I got my first taste of Yakuza with Yakuza 0, and the first thing I wanted to know was why in the fuck nobody had put a gun to my head, strapped me to a gurney, and forced me to play any of these damn games before. So-called friends. Despite having heard of the series and even getting a Yakuza-themed ashtray in the mail once for some reason, I'd never given the series a try. But when I finally got a solid introductory shot with Yakuza 0, it's safe to say I was blown away. As well as being an excellent brawler with RPG elements and a joyously meaty combat system, it's a master of tonal balance, delivering both gritty, serious storytelling and utterly bizarre nonsense that would give Deadly Premonitions, Twin Peaks-inspired silliness a run for its money. One moment you're fighting for your life against sinister gangsters, the next you're helping a blatant Michael Jackson XP film his latest music video while fighting background actors dressed as zombies because of course. But the real revelation, the real genius of the Yakuza series is how utterly fucking massive its world is. And if you've ever played Yakuza, you might wonder why I say that, since this is its map. What we're looking at here is the entire map of Kamurocho, or Kamuro... Oh, these words are gonna fucking murder me. The Tokyo district in which the vast majority of Yakuza and its remake Yakuza Kiwami takes place. As you can see, it's bloody tiny, especially compared to the vast open worlds we've grown so accustomed to from the so-called AAA publishers. This one small map is a blip on the radar compared to the expanses found in Assassin's Creed or Far Cry releases. And yet for such meagre square footage, Yakuza is arguably a bigger game than either of Ubisoft's aforementioned staples. Not since Shenmue will you find more variety in such a comparatively tiny place. What Yakuza gets right about open worlds is understanding the truth of that otherwise tired innuendo. It ain't the size that counts, it's how you use it. This game's world is small, so minuscule in comparison to other open worlds that some may even balk at classifying Kamurocho as such, and yet it's so densely populated it feels as vast as anything Bethesda's pumped out, perhaps more so, and in part due to that density. The district is small, but it's packed to the fucking gills with content, and we're not just talking about shitty filler material that most allegedly ambitious sprawling maps feature these days. First of all, you have the wide variety of minigames found in establishments dotted around the city streets. There's karaoke, of course, which is not just an amusing rhythm game, but is shamelessly over the top in both presentation and singing style. There's an arcade featuring not just a lovingly rendered and functional UFO catcher, but a rock paper scissors fighting game about women who are also insects. Okay. More conventional games like darts, bowling, mahjong, blackjack, and plenty more are all thrown in as well, and while this stuff classifies as minigame material, each distraction could itself qualify for a game in its own right, providing potentially hours of playtime on its own, depending on how deep you want to get into it. While most modern open worlds content themselves with one or two shallow minigames, repetitive recycled busywork quests, or an endless slew of hidden collectibles, Yakuza showers the player in not just one but many minigames, each with their own sense of escalation and progression. Hell, you could very easily spend all day just fucking around with Pocket Circuit, a whole slot car racing game that involves not just collecting and customizing car parts, but has an associated storyline to boot. This series contains as optional distractions what other games can be built entirely around. From its dating simulator to its Fight Club arena, otherwise throwaway content is as detailed as any mandatory storyline mission. With a level of progression and depth most open world games can barely give even their mandatory story missions, let alone their filler material. That's why when I played not just Yakuza 0 but Kiwami within months of each other, the fact both took place largely in the same few blocks of city space didn't matter to me one fucking bit. Because the size of the world didn't matter. The reuse of the same map didn't matter. What mattered was the events and activities taking place inside that space. And in that regard, Yakuza is king. While things that could be considered padding, such as collectible items, still exist in the Yakuza games, even they tend to be tied to content with a more significant and engaging role. And we're still just talking about minigames and quote-unquote shallow activities here. There are also dozens upon dozens of sub-stories, encounters with the citizens of Kamurocho that take protagonist Kiryu on all sorts of ludicrous adventures with their own self-contained storylines, sometimes spanning multiple sub-stories that unlock as you progress through the game. And make no mistakes, these aren't just tasks, these are actual side quests with uniquely written characters and situations, each one a self-contained adventure. Aside from a few exceptions such as the Elder Scrolls and Witcher games, the idea of the well-written side quest has become something of a lost art as most open world titles ditched them in favour of 4 or 5 identical tasks copied and pasted across thousands of square miles of bugger all. Climb this radio tower, clear out this enemy camp, fuck off and give me a storyline about helping a sex worker become a better dominatrix, god damn it! Because that's what the Yakuza series gives me instead of a big empty sandbox with a few things to do. A tighter, smaller map, densely populated with a vast array of things to do, and side quests as carefully and lovingly written as the main plot itself. Now that's a real open world game, you animals! Like I said, I played Yakuza 0 and Kiwami within mere months of each other, both of them featuring hours upon hours of time spent in the same damn place, and not once was I bored. Neither time was I tired of wandering around the district, beating up mobsters, helping eccentric civilians resolve their absurd problems, and going out on dates with the girl from the hostess club. Compare this to something like Destiny 2, where I've had access to multiple fucking planets and still ended up tired of its grinding bullshit. Compare this to No Man's Sky, which, well, let's just say I'd rather spend 20 hours in Kamurocho over 20 minutes in that mindlessly monotonous alleged universe. You'll notice I've barely mentioned the main story campaigns for either of these more recent Yakuza entries, and that's because with so much to do and see in this tiny massive world, the actual campaigns feel like the distractions from the rest of it. But this is not to say Yakuza skimps on that shit either, because the plots are fucking ace as well. When you see what Sega's managed to pull off with this shit for years, it puts to shame a lot of the better looking, larger scaled, massively over budgeted games from the AAA world. It also demonstrates how asset reuse is not by itself a terrible thing. The Yakuza games reuse loads of assets. I mean, I've just banged on about how I played 2 games with the same map within months of each other, but the situations and the activities are so wild it really doesn't matter. The time, energy and money saved was put to better use elsewhere, which serves as the primary difference between this and, say, Dynasty Warriors' shameless recycling of content to the point of autoerotic asset flipsiation. Goddamn, that's still so fun to say. And some people will claim the games aren't all that visually impressive, and I say to bollocks with that stuffy attitude. It looks as good as it needs to look, because the actual gameplay is the focus, and the gameplay is fan-fucking-tastic. Even the basic brawling combat continues to expand as new special moves are unlocked, while fresh weaponry and situational attacks unveil themselves. Yakuza puts gameplay first, and sadly that's something you you cannot say of an increasing number of AAA games these days. I'm a fan of smaller worlds anyway. While some might consider exploring said worlds to be backtracking, by now a thoroughly dirty word in the video game world, I personally prefer having a smaller world I get to intimately know through consistent exposure and a variety of stuff to do in said world. While some huge games can accomplish a similar sense of familiarity, most are simply too big and not detailed enough to strike that sort of chord. It seems that developers these days labour under the impression a player will automatically get bored if they're not being thrown into a new location constantly, that they'll tire quickly if there aren't miles upon miles of forestry to wander about in. But then I think back to one of my favourite adventure games, Beneath a Steel Sky, a little escapade that takes place across a thimbleful of environments and can have one spending hours solving puzzles across just 1 or 2 screens. And you know what? I didn't just love that game in spite of such a thing, I loved it because of such a thing. I loved Beneath a Steel Sky because it only boasted a rather small amount of screens compared to the gigantic seamless realms of modern games. Those small screens were like home after a while, an integrally intimate part of the experience itself. With only a few characters and locales, the player learns to love every little intricacy, every artfully crafted detail. This is true of so many classic point-and-click adventure games, where the sense of scale and awe came not from how big a world was, but how meticulously crafted and thoroughly comprehensive it was. It's for that same reason I fell so deeply in love with Yakuza. Many times I've said that art style trumps horsepower in terms of graphics, and the same can be said of world design as well. Give me artistry over size, give me detail over scale, give me a place to call home, a small world with a lot to do over a borderline empty universe. Art beats scale, design beats size, and don't call a game ambitious just because its map is big. That's not ambitious. Ambition is committing to giving the player loads of fun and varied things to do, no matter the size of the play space. I wish more games were ambitious and didn't just say they were, but that's not the world we live in, so thank God for games like Yakuza, or Kamurocho, Kiryu, and that.
Pipes are the arteries of this mighty erection.
Oh, Sega, for everything you get right about the series, maybe next time you have a demo, don't put the demo up that's actually the full game by mistake. Good on you for letting people keep their progress, though. I smash these boglins about a fair bit, like knock them over and all that, but do remember that these are specially trained stunt boglins. I do have another set of these ones, and so these ones have been specifically trained up to be able to withstand all sorts of knocks and bashes. So if you are going to be getting boglins to abuse them, make sure that they're fully trained in that arena, in that area. So don't fuck about with your boglins unless they're stunt boglins. I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about. It's 6 in the morning. We should just probably stop this. Thank God for me and all that, but what the fuck was any of that?
We're more than a couple of guys start reviewing the film.
I'm bound to the format, that's the problem. You need an end monologue because you designed the show that way, but you don't have anything to bound by the format. Kind of made a rod for my own back. I was going to say rod for me on Jane and Freddie, but that's a joke that comedian Ian Boldsworth made once. Ian Boldsworth. Do a podcast with him sometimes on the Jimquisition podcast channel. It's astounding how little I've got to say today, but I just kind of don't feel comfortable just stopping the camera. So this is just weird and uncomfortable, isn't it? I haven't even got my gloves on now, so should probably just roll credits.
Everybody's thinking about me.
Hit the lever!
Guillermo del Toro, right, won an Oscar for that film he made about boinking a fish, and that's not really got anything to do with Konami, but as someone on Twitter reminded me after I'd already done the filming, Konami is trying to peddle Metal Gear Solid to people, well, the name at least, without realising they didn't just lose Kojima. Hideo's best mates with an Oscar fucking winner, because he's all buddies with Del Toro, who himself has said fuck Konami before. So not only did they lose the chance to have their products associated with an Oscar winner, they also made that Oscar winner hate them because of how spiteful and dickish they were to a former employee, because Konami's business decisions are 50% bad ideas and 50% just trying to get at someone. I wish Del Toro knew that I'd started the fuck Konami thing though. I bet he doesn't. He definitely doesn't. I can't be best friends with Del Toro, even though I should be. And then maybe I'd hang around with a man who won a gold statue for making a film about fucking a fish. It's probably because I say things like that I'll never be friends with Del Toro. Or get him to buy the Fuck Konami t-shirt, which can be yours for a very reasonable price. But like I said on the Twitter before I came on here and said it here, Kojima hangs out with Oscar winners, while Konami can't even make a good game built off work his team already did. And speaking of someone who's been sidelined by companies before only to go on their own way and do far better than the companies themselves, it makes me like Kojima all the more. Also, in case you haven't learned the general conceit of this segment by now, fuck Konami. That's the point of it, innit?